"You're so selfish, Mom. Can't you just give us the damn house already?" Before I could react, Tina shoved her chair back with a screech of wood against hardwood. She pointed her fork at me like a weapon. "You heard him," she snapped. "It's ridiculous. We pay over $2,000 in rent for a shoebox while you take up a whole house alone." I blinked at her. Not because I didn't understand the words, but because I didn't understand how we got here. Just 30 minutes earlier, I had stood in this same kitchen, warming the rolls, humming quietly to myself. The kids were in the living room, giggling over a cartoon bunny. Josh walked in carrying flowers, yellow daisies, my favorite, and kissed my cheek. He smelled like aftershave and hope. That's what I thought. Hope. Tina came next, carrying a store-bought pie peach, not apple, and I didn't show even a flicker of disappointment. I simply thanked her. I had set out my best dishes. I'd even worn my pale blue cardigan, the one Josh bought me for Mother's Day years ago. Then the first sign something was off. No one bowed their heads when I tried to say grace. Tina rolled her eyes. Josh cleared his throat. The kids looked confused, so I rushed through it, pretending not to notice. It was subtle at first. Then, not so subtle. Tina sighed dramatically when I passed the vegetables. She complained the house was too big to clean alone. She mentioned twice how her parents were really struggling to find a long-term place, and how fortunate I was that my mortgage was paid off. Josh nodded along, barely eating. My stomach churned before I tasted a single bite. Now here we were. The mask slipped. What they really wanted was on full display, and it wasn't lunch. "I raised you in this house," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Your father—" "My father is gone," Josh snapped, looking at me for the first time, eyes full of something I didn't recognize. "And you need help managing things. It's common sense." "No," I corrected gently. "It's convenience. For you." That's when Tina's fork dropped to the plate with a clatter. Her patience had clearly expired. "You're being dramatic," she said. "Let's call this what it is. You're hoarding space while your family struggles." "I'm not hoarding anything," I replied. "I simply want to stay in the home where I've lived my life, where I raised my son. And that home should go to US, Tina shot back. "We're the future of this family. Don't you care about your grandchildren?" She gestured toward the kids who sat frozen, wide-eyed and silent. 8-year-old Emily clutched her napkin like a lifeline. 6-year-old Ben pushed peas around his plate, pretending not to hear. I did care. More than anything in the world, that's why this hurts so much. "I care enough," I said slowly, "to know when a line needs to be drawn." "What line?" Josh scoffed. "The one where you stop treating me like a burden." The pause that followed was the final warning, the kind you can miss if you're not listening closely, the stillness before a storm. And then Tina exploded. She grabbed her plate, steaming mashed potatoes, gravy, bits of roast beef, and hurled it right at me. A wet, ugly smack against my sweater. The gravy splashed my neck. The potatoes clung to the fibers like shame. The kids screamed. Josh stood, but he didn't rush to me. He rushed to her. "Tina! Calm down," he hissed in a sharp whisper, his eyes darting nervously to the window like he was worried the neighbors might hear. No one looked at me. No one said sorry. I felt heat rise under the gravy. Anger, humiliation, heartbreak. My hands trembled beneath the table. I pushed my chair back slowly, wiping my face with the back of my hand. A bit of carrot fell into my lap and bounced to the floor. "Well," I said quietly, "I think I need to see a doctor." They finally looked at me then, but only because I was ruining their momentum. "And a lawyer." Josh stepped toward me, panic lighting up his features. "Mom, don't do this. We're trying to help you." That, I said, was not help. I didn't shout. I didn't slam a door. I left with dignity intact, even if my sweater wasn't. I walked past the entryway table where family photos sat in frames, Josh's elementary school graduation, his first soccer trophy, his wedding day, smiling beside Tina, my hand on his shoulder. All moments of pride frozen in time. How strange that a lifetime of love could shatter in one meal. Outside, the fall wind smelled like rain and burning leaves. The familiar creak of my old Subaru echoed as I opened the door and settled into the driver's seat. For a second, I let my forehead rest against the steering wheel. My chest ached not from the physical blow, but from the realization that love alone couldn't save this. Have you ever felt the way I did? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to give this video a like. It means a lot and gives me the strength to keep telling more stories like this one. I pulled out my phone and unlocked the screen. A photo of Josh holding newborn Emily stared back at me, a reminder of everything I thought would last. I scrolled to the message thread labeled DE. Deborah Evans, attorney at law, old friend, my safety net. With mashed potatoes still crusting on my sleeve, I typed 4 simple words that tasted like steel and freedom. Phase 1 is complete. Then I pressed send. I sat up straight, took a deep breath, put both hands on the wheel. Sometimes, the first step to protecting yourself is realizing who you need protection from, even when they share your blood. The drive to the urgent care clinic was silent, except for the rhythmic hum of my old Subaru. The windshield wipers moved lazily across the glass, brushing away the occasional drizzle. I didn't bother turning on the radio. I didn't want noise. I wanted clarity. The mashed potatoes had started to crust by the time I arrived. My cardigan was stiff in places, and the faint smell of gravy lingered like a ghost of that awful moment. I walked into the clinic without checking the mirror. Let them see me as I was shaken, humiliated, but still standing. The receptionist gave a small gasp when she looked up. "Ma'am, do you need assistance?" "I'd like to be seen for a burn," I said, my voice steady. "It's minor, but I want it documented." They took me in quickly. I suppose the food on my clothes made it clear I wasn't here for the flu. A young nurse with cropped blonde hair and tired eyes led me into an exam room. She didn't ask too many questions, just did her job. Professional. Kind. The physician was maybe in his early 40s. Polite, respectful. He checked the area on my neck, just above the collarbone, where the gravy had hit first. A small red welt had formed. "Does this hurt when I press here?" he asked. "A little," I said, though the truth was it didn't hurt nearly as much as the reason it happened. He nodded and scribbled on his clipboard. "Superficial burn, nothing permanent, but I'll note it in your chart. Would you like us to take photos for record keeping?" "Yes," I said, "please, and I'd like a copy sent to my personal email." His eyebrows lifted slightly, but he didn't ask why. Afterward, I sat in my car in the parking lot for nearly 20 minutes. The drizzle had stopped, and the late afternoon sun was beginning to break through the clouds, casting soft golden streaks across the dashboard. I pulled down the visor mirror and looked at myself for the first time since the explosion at lunch. There was a small smear of dried potato on my cheekbone. My lipstick had faded. My eyes looked older than they had that morning, not from age but from recognition. That burn wasn't from gravy, it was from betrayal. I thought about going home, washing it all off, pretending it never happened. I thought about Josh's face, how quickly he had turned from son to stranger. I thought about Emily, her small hands gripping the edge of the table, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. And then I thought about the folder in the safe beneath my bed. That night I drove straight to the pharmacy. I picked up a burn ointment, some antiseptic wipes, and a new notebook. It wasn't fancy, just lined pages, soft cover, but it would serve its purpose. I returned home just after sunset. The porch light flicked on automatically as I stepped onto the front steps. For a moment I stood still, staring at the door. It looked the same. The same wreath I'd hung last week, the same welcome mat Josh had given me one Christmas. Funny how everything outside can look unchanged when everything inside has shifted beyond repair. I went straight to the kitchen. The scent of roast beef still clung faintly to the air, but the warmth was gone. The dining room table was exactly as we'd left it. Plates smeared, utensils strewn, the floor a battlefield of discarded food. I didn't clean it. I went to my bedroom, opened the safe, and pulled out the folder. Inside, my will, copies of my financial records, letters I had drafted but never sent, and the business card of one Deborah Evans, attorney at law. Deborah and I had gone to high school together. We hadn't been close then, but we'd crossed paths again years later at a community fundraiser. She specialized in elder law estate planning, protection against financial abuse, guardianship cases. We'd had coffee just 3 months ago. I'd asked a few hypothetical questions. She'd given me very real advice. I texted her again, "Photos incoming. Let me know if you need anything else to move forward." Then I took out the notebook, opened to the first page, and wrote, "Sunday, October 27th. Today, my son and his wife showed me exactly who they are. This is the day I stopped pretending. I set the notebook beside my bed, next to the lamp, like a ritual. The next morning, I didn't hear from Josh. No call, no message, no apology. Instead, I got a message from Tina. Just one line. "We need to talk." I didn't reply. I made a cup of coffee and took it to the porch, wrapped in a clean cardigan, watching the neighborhood wake up around me. People walked their dogs. A neighbor waved. Someone across the street was raking leaves into neat golden piles. My world hadn't ended. It had only clarified. I reached down, plucked a crisp maple leaf from the porch, and held it in my hand. It was beautiful, even in decay, fragile yet defiantly red. I slipped it between the pages of my notebook, pressing it flat. Then I stood up, went inside, and got ready. Because this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Monday morning brought a gray sky and the faint scent of rain in the air. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where yesterday's battle had taken place. I had wiped the table down late last night, just the surface. The floor was still stained with gravy, and a few carrots had rolled under the cabinet. I hadn't touched the chairs. Josh's still had a napkin crumpled on the seat, like a remnant of someone who left too quickly or didn't think they'd need to come back. I wrapped my hands around a warm mug of black coffee. No cream today. I didn't want softness. I wanted the bitterness to keep me awake. The silence in the house wasn't new, but today it had changed tone. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was expectant. I stared at the empty hallway, then slowly stood and walked toward the back bedroom, what used to be the den. That's where I kept the trunk. The trunk wasn't anything fancy, just a dark cedar chest with brass corners. My husband Alan had built it himself during our second year of marriage. We used to store holiday decorations in it, then later it became a memory chest. After he died, I put all his letters in there. And the journals, the ones I stopped reading after the second anniversary of his passing. It had been too much back then, too fresh, too raw. But today, I needed Alan, or at least his words. I pulled the trunk open and was greeted with the soft scent of cedar and paper and time. I ran my fingers across the spines of the journals until I found the one marked 2004, the year Josh turned 18. The year Alan was diagnosed, the year everything began to shift in quiet, irreversible ways. Back in the kitchen, I opened the journal gently, as if it might dissolve under the weight of what I needed from it. The 12th of April, 2004. Josh has been withdrawn lately. I think he's scared about college, about me, about the future. I told Maggie last night that I worry we're losing him, not all at once, but in pieces. She says we have to trust that what we gave him was enough. God, I hope she's right. My throat tightened. Alan had always been softer with Josh than I was. I was the one who pushed the homework, the curfews, the manners. Alan was the one who sat quietly beside him after arguments, handing him a soda and saying, "Your mom's not mad, she just loves you hard." I flipped ahead a few pages. Another entry. The 3rd of July, 2004. Treatment's rough. I see it in Maggie's eyes. She's trying to be strong for me and for Josh. She told me today that she'd protect this family no matter what. I believe her. Even when I'm gone, she'll be the shield. She always has been. My hands trembled. Back then, I had promised Alan I'd keep us all together, that I'd keep this family safe. I closed the journal, resting my hand on the cover for a long while. What he didn't know was that sometimes being the shield means standing between your family and their own destruction, even if they're the ones holding the weapons. That afternoon, I went to the local print shop and made copies of the photos from the clinic, clear, time-stamped images of the small burn and the stained sweater. I placed the originals in a file marked Incident Documentation and tucked them back into the safe. By the time I got home, a voicemail was waiting. It was Josh. "Hey, Mom, look, about yesterday. Things got out of hand. Tina's under a lot of pressure, and I just think we all need to cool off. Let's not blow this up into something legal, okay? Let's talk, please." His voice sounded tired, not remorseful, just inconvenienced. I didn't call back. Instead, I sat on the front porch with a warm blanket draped across my lap. The sun peeked through the clouds around 4 o'clock, casting golden light on the garden I had planted 20 years ago. The mums were blooming, thick and stubborn in their clay pots. Alan used to joke they had more resilience than either of us. I brought out the journal and read a few more passages. They weren't about legal battles or betrayal or trust funds. They were about dinners and walks and small, everyday moments that felt enormous now. That's what we lose when families break apart, not just the big gatherings, but the small rituals, the quiet nods across a dinner table, the shared silence while folding laundry, the knowing glance when your child says something that echoes the past. I knew I couldn't go back to that, but I could go forward with intention. I picked up my phone and sent another text to Deborah. Document copies secured. Call me tomorrow to schedule the next step. I didn't know exactly what next would look like. I just knew I was done pretending everything was fine. I was done keeping the peace while my dignity eroded. That night, before I turned off the lamp, I slipped Alan's journal back into the cedar chest. Then I reached for my own notebook, opened to a fresh page, and wrote, Monday, October 28th. Today I remembered who I used to be and who I promised I'd always protect. I underlined it twice. Then I turned off the light and let the silence settle over me, not as a weight but as a promise. By Tuesday morning, the burn on my neck had faded to a pink patch, barely visible under my collar. But the bruise forming beneath my chest, that one had nothing to do with the gravy. It pulsed every time my phone buzzed. 3 missed calls from Josh, 1 voicemail, 2 messages from Tina, both long paragraphs that started with excuses and ended with accusations. I didn't open them. Instead, I opened my curtains to let in the cold October light. The house looked like it always had on a weekday morning, quiet, neat, waiting, but everything in me felt different. Alan's journal lay open on the sofa where I'd left it the night before, like a silent witness reminding me, protect what matters. At 10 sharp, I grabbed my purse and car keys. Today wasn't for tears or staring at old memories. Today was structure. Today was strategy. The law office of Deborah Evans sat in a refurbished brick building downtown, right above a bakery that always smelled like cinnamon and warm sugar. I climbed the short flight of stairs, feeling a steadiness in my step that I hadn't felt in years. Deborah looked exactly the same as I remembered: sleek gray bob, sharp navy suit, glasses resting halfway down her nose. A woman who made aging look like evolution. Maggie, she said warmly, crossing the room to hug me. I got your texts. Come in, let's get to work. Oh. Her office was lined with legal books and framed photographs, marches for senior rights, award ceremonies with mayors and governors. This was a woman who didn't just argue for justice, she built it. She motioned for me to sit as she closed the door and pulled a tablet from her desk. All right, she said, tapping a file open. Start from the beginning, every detail. So I did. I told her about the Sunday dinner, Tina's plate flying through the air, the burn, the clinic visit. I handed her printed documentation, the time-stamped photos, the report from urgent care. I showed her the voicemail from Josh where he used the phrase legal, almost as a warning. When I finished, Deborah nodded slowly. This wasn't an accident, she said. This was punishment for telling them no. And given what we've already uncovered, attempted access to your finances, this is a big red flag. When did family concern become a crime? I murmured, half to myself. When concern becomes coercion, she replied. Deborah turned her screen to show me a list of legal actions. We're going to take this step by step, she said. First, file an official report for physical assault and obtain a protective order against Tina. Second, document your financial protections, your trust, your accounts, and your competency evaluation. Third, establish clear conditions for contact with Josh moving forward. I stared at the list. It looked like a battle plan. I never wanted to fight my own son, I whispered. Deborah leaned forward, voice soft. You aren't fighting him, Maggie. You're defending you. We went over everything again, line by line. She explained the legal language, what to say, what not to say if Josh tried to corner me into another argument. She also added something I hadn't expected, a recommendation for a therapist who specialized in parental boundary trauma. Just in case you need someone objective to talk to, she said gently. This isn't easy. I'll think about it, I replied, and I meant it. When the paperwork was done, Deborah printed copies for me, neat stacks of evidence that my dignity was not up for debate. She held the door for me as I stood. Remember this, she said, eyes level with mine. Loving someone does not mean letting them hurt you. Boundaries are not walls, they are doors with well-managed locks. I took a long breath. Thank you, she smiled. We're just getting started. All. Outside, the wind had picked up. Leaves skittered across the sidewalk like tiny orange warnings. I paused at the bottom step, listening to the bakery's doorbell jingle behind a customer. For a brief second, I thought about going in, ordering a cinnamon roll like Alan used to do when life felt heavy. But no, this victory deserved to be felt without sugar to soften it. Back home, my house greeted me with a stillness that no longer felt lonely. It felt chosen. I put the binder of documents on the coffee table. Beside it, the notebook waited, open to a blank page. I clicked the pen, and the ink seemed eager to move. Tuesday, October 29th. Today, I told the truth out loud. And the world did not end. It simply shifted with me at the center. Before closing the notebook, I added a final line. Justice begins quietly. As evening settled in, I made myself a simple dinner: grilled cheese and tomato soup, comfort from a can. I ate at the same dining room table, but I sat in a different chair, facing the window instead of the empty place where Josh had sat just 2 days earlier. Sometimes you have to rebuild your rituals. After washing the dishes, I stepped outside to bring in the mail. A single envelope waited in the box, no name on the return address. My heart lifted for a moment, thinking maybe Emily had drawn me another picture. But when I opened it, it was just a blank sheet of paper inside. Except it wasn't blank. A message faintly indented into the paper, as if someone pressed with a pen without ink. I tilted it toward the light. We're not done. My fingers tightened around the page. The air felt colder, the silence around me heavier. Inside, the binder of documents seemed to glow beneath the lamplight, a shield made of paper and resolve. I closed the door firmly, locked it, and drew the bolt. Let them see I was not afraid. Let them learn that love has limits. I held the piece of paper under the kitchen light again, tracing the words with my fingertips as if pressure alone might explain their presence. We're not done. No return address, no signature. Just those 4 words, shallowly etched into cheap stationery. I'd seen that handwriting before. Josh never pressed hard when he wrote. His script had always been light, slanted, almost apologetic. When he was younger, I used to say his letters looked like they were afraid to bother the paper. This note didn't frighten me, but it did confirm something I'd already known deep down. They weren't giving up. Not because of love, because of control. I folded the page carefully and placed it inside a plastic sleeve, then slid it into the evidence section of my binder. Not because I planned on marching into court tomorrow, but because when people show you who they are, you document it. I texted Deborah. Unmarked envelope arrived today. No sender. Embossed message. We're not done. Adding to binder. Her reply came within minutes. Log it. Don't respond. Consider installing a camera if you haven't already. I can have someone drop one off. I replied with a thumbs up emoji, then turned off the kitchen light. The house felt a little darker than usual, or maybe I just noticed it more now. I'd been through worse. Alan's cancer had stolen 2 years of our lives, slowly and cruelly. This was a different kind of pain, sharper, personal, because grief has rules. Family betrayal does not. The next morning, I woke early and took my coffee outside. The frost had kissed the grass overnight, leaving it pale and crisp. I tucked a shawl around my shoulders and watched as the sun climbed over the neighbor's garage roof. For a moment, the world was quiet enough to forget. Then I heard it. A car idling at the end of the street. A navy blue sedan with tinted windows. Too early for the mailman, too late for school drop-off. I watched it from my porch for a solid 3 minutes. No movement. Then finally the engine cut, and the car rolled forward slowly before turning down the next block. I wasn't imagining things. That afternoon, I drove to the hardware store and picked up a motion-activated camera and a deadbolt for the back door. The boy at the register offered to carry the box to my car. His kindness made me want to cry, but I didn't. Not for a lock, not for a camera. I installed the deadbolt myself. Took me longer than I'd admit to Deborah, but by sundown, the back door clicked shut with a satisfying thunk. One more boundary in place. The camera was trickier. I left that for the morning and went about my evening like I used to, cooking, reading, watching a nature show with the volume just high enough to keep my mind off things. But when I picked up my book, a photograph slipped out. It was old, slightly faded at the edges. Josh, age 10, standing beside me in the front yard with a bucket of apples. We had spent that entire afternoon baking pies for the church fundraiser. His cheeks were sticky with sugar, and mine were red from the sundae. We looked so happy. I wanted to believe that version of him still existed, buried beneath the greed, beneath Tina, beneath the pride. But grief has taught me that not all people return to who they were. Some stay lost. I placed the photo beside the notebook and wrote, Wednesday, October 30th. A message came, not in words I could hear, but ones I could feel etched, like warning signs on paper. I am not afraid, but I am not naive either. Before I closed the notebook, I added, this is what power feels like. Quiet, measured, prepared. The next morning, I heard a knock at the front door. Not a pounding, but a tap, tap, tap calculated. Light. I looked through the peephole and saw a familiar face. Tina, standing there in a gray hoodie, her hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked tired, not angry. I didn't open the door. She looked directly into the peephole. Maggie, she said quietly, I'm here to apologize. Still, I didn't open it. I shouldn't have done what I did. I'm not proud of it, but Josh, he's just under a lot of pressure. We're trying, you know. Trying to what? Force me out? Strip my autonomy? I brought something for Emily and Ben, she continued, holding up a small bag. They made cards. They miss you. I said nothing. You don't have to open the door, she added. I wanted you to know I'm not the enemy, okay? She placed the bag on the porch step and walked away slowly, glancing back only once. I waited until she drove off before stepping outside. I picked up the bag carefully, like it might bite. Inside were 2 folded cards, clearly handmade. One from Emily, with a picture of the 2 of us baking cookies. I miss Grandma's hugs, it said in her blocky handwriting. Ben's card had a stick figure drawing and the words, love you, written 3 times. There was also a small, factory-sealed apple pie from the grocery store. I held the bag against my chest for a long time, standing barefoot on the porch, watching the wind pull leaves into spirals across the yard. Then I brought it all inside, not as a peace offering, but as evidence of the chaos love can leave in its wake. That night, I didn't write in my notebook. I just opened Emily's card, traced her handwriting with my thumb, and whispered to no one, I miss you too. The apple pie sat on my counter for 2 days. I didn't have the heart to throw it out, but I couldn't bring myself to eat it either. It stared at me every time I made tea or sliced an orange, its perfect golden crust a quiet reminder that some gestures are layered, like the dessert itself sweet on the surface, but with ingredients you can't quite trust. By Thursday morning, I finally slid it into the freezer. I wasn't ready to forgive, but I wasn't ready to forget either. That afternoon, Deborah called. Her voice, as always, was calm and crisp. I've spoken with a forensic handwriting expert, she said. If you want to confirm that note was Josh's, we can run a sample comparison. I already have a few things you'd shared previously. Old birthday cards, a thank you note. You really think it's necessary? I asked. I think it's empowering, she replied. Sometimes what we already know needs proof for the world to believe it. She was right. So I gave her the go-ahead. We also set a date for a formal affidavit, something official to document the assault, the emotional coercion, the threatening note. I felt something tighten inside me when I heard the word affidavit, not fear, finality. After the call, I went out back to water the late autumn mums. Their color had started to fade, but they were still hanging on determined, even when the season no longer favored them. I liked that about mums. They had dignity. While I worked, I heard footsteps crunching along the side path. I stiffened, hose still running in my hand. Then a soft voice called out, "Hey, Grandma." I turned, startled, and there she was. Emily, 8 years old. Her hair was longer than I remembered, tied in 2 uneven braids. She wore a pink coat and clutched a folded piece of paper in her hand. I blinked. "Emily, sweetheart, where's your dad?" She looked over her shoulder, then back at me. "In the car. Down the street. He doesn't know I came over." I said I forgot my jacket. I turned off the hose and crouched to meet her eye level. "You can't come here without an adult knowing, sweetie. It's not safe." "I know," she said, her lip quivering. "But I wanted to see you. I don't understand what's going on. Mommy cries, Daddy yells, and Ben says we're not allowed to say your name at dinner anymore. I felt the weight of her confusion like a stone in my chest. I miss baking with you, she whispered, holding out the paper. I made a new recipe for pie. I called it Grandma's Kind Pie. I took the paper and unfolded it. Inside was a child's drawing of a pie, steam rising, hearts floating above it. The ingredients were listed as hugs, smiles, warm blankets, good stories, and love. I hugged her, tighter than I probably should have. I love you so much, I whispered. But you can't come alone again. That's very important. Promise me? She nodded solemnly, eyes shining. Can I visit you when things are better? If it's safe, and your parents agree, I said. But no matter what, I'll always be thinking about you. She hugged me once more and then ran off down the side path. I watched her go, her little pink coat bobbing between the trees, until she disappeared around the corner. I stood there for a long time. Later that night, I placed her drawing in the same folder as the threatening note. Different kinds of messages, different intentions, but both part of the same story. That evening, I called my old friend Caroline. We hadn't spoken in a few months, but she had known Josh since he was born, and she'd always been honest with me even when the truth was uncomfortable. Sounds like you've crossed a bridge, she said after I caught her up on everything. I don't know if I crossed it or burned it. Well, she said, sometimes you have to do both. You cross it, then you light the match so you never go back. She was quiet for a moment, then added, But Maggie, just remember, protecting yourself doesn't mean you're giving up on love. It just means you're refusing to be hurt by it anymore. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. Before bed, I opened the notebook and wrote, Thursday, October 31st. My granddaughter crossed enemy lines to bring me a recipe for kindness. My son parked down the street like a thief, and I chose to see both clearly, without flinching. I paused, then added, You can love someone and still lock the door. Friday morning came with a whisper of frost across the windows. I sat by the kitchen counter, Emily's drawing still resting beside my coffee mug. I hadn't moved it since last night. Part of me didn't want to. It reminded me of who I was before everything turned. Not weak, not naive, just softer. But softness, I was learning, doesn't always survive in the presence of wolves. I stared at the mug in my hand, the same old ceramic one with a faded cardinal on it. Alan had given it to me for our 10th anniversary. You're my little redbird, he used to say. I used to laugh at that. Now, I sipped from it like it held a memory instead of coffee. A knock on the door startled me. Not the peephole tap 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 like Tina. This was louder, official. I pulled back the curtain and saw two figures, one in a dark suit, the other in business casual, clipboard in hand. I opened the door a few cautious inches. Yes? Mrs. Margaret Dalton, the man asked, his badge already lifted. Detective Rhodes, this is Officer Mayer. We'd like to ask a few questions about an incident that occurred here on October 27th. My breath hitched. I stepped aside. The living room looked too cozy for police. Quilted pillows, flickering candles, a floral throw. But it didn't seem to bother them. They sat politely, pulling out a notepad and beginning with the basics. Names, dates, descriptions. I told them about the dinner, about Tina's outburst, about the food thrown and the injury. I showed them the clinic photos and the affidavit Deborah had prepared. Their pens scratched steadily across the paper. And the note? Officer Mayer asked gently. I retrieved the envelope from the binder and handed it over with gloved hands. No return address, but the handwriting matches my son's. Deborah, my attorney, is working on handwriting verification. Detective Rhodes nodded. We'll keep this. Chain of evidence. You did the right thing documenting everything. I wanted to ask why now? Why are you here? But I didn't need to. Because as they wrapped up the interview, the detective said something that sent ice up my spine. We had a report filed from a third party, said there's concern for your well-being, that someone in your family might be coercing you into giving up property. My eyes widened. Who reported it? I can't say, he replied. But I can say this, it's not the first time we've seen this sort of case. I nodded slowly. It wasn't just mine anymore. They left after 20 minutes, professional and quiet, their clipboards full of testimony and tension. I locked the door behind them and stood there, heart pounding. Someone out there was watching and not in malice. Someone saw what was happening and decided to act. I stepped out to the backyard to clear my mind. The mums were still hanging on, though their petals had started to curl. I knelt beside the largest pot and began trimming the browned edges when I heard the voice. "You always did have a green thumb." I turned and saw her. Loretta Henderson. My neighbor of 30 years, standing in her yard with a rake in one hand and a smirk on her face. Her salt and pepper hair was tucked under a scarf, her eyes sharp as ever. "I saw the car," she said. "Police. Everything okay?" I hesitated, then nodded. "As okay as things can be." She nodded back, then leaned on the rake. "You know, I've been watching the way your son parks down the block lately. That girl of his too, slipping by like shadows. I didn't want to pry, but it's not hard to tell something's off." I sighed. "It's been a season." Loretta stepped closer, lowering her voice. "If you ever need a witness, someone who saw things, I'm around, and I remember..." "Remember what?" She smiled sadly. "The way he used to look at you, and the way he doesn't now." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She patted my arm and returned to her raking. Back inside, I stared at my notebook, unsure how to capture the strange calm that had settled in my chest. A calm that came not from safety but from knowing I wasn't alone. Friday, November 1st. Today, the law knocked. Not to take something, but to listen. And my neighbor, with her rake and quiet wisdom, offered me the thing I needed most, to be believed. I underlined it twice, then wrote, "Justice grows in gardens where truth is planted, quietly, boldly, one root at a time." Saturday morning arrived without an alarm clock, just the rustle of dry leaves scratching across the porch. I stayed in bed a little longer, letting the silence stretch. There was no knock, no message, no Emily slipping down the path with innocent eyes and two big shoes. Just the deep, familiar ache of solitude, and for once, it didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like ownership. The news had gotten out. I don't know how, but by noon I'd received 2 phone calls, 3 emails, and a casserole left at my front door. The first call was from Ellen Marsh, one of the ladies from the church sewing circle. "Maggie, dear, I don't want to pry, but is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," I said, voice calm. "Just a little family matter." She hesitated, then said, "Well, I heard there was a police car outside your house yesterday. You know people talk." "Yes," I replied gently. "They do." The second call was less polite. Tina's mother. "You've crossed a line, Margaret," she spat into the phone. "Calling the police? Are you out of your mind? That's your son you're threatening with legal action." I held the phone away from my ear for a moment, then calmly responded, "No, that's your daughter who threw a plate at my face." She hung up without another word. The emails were from former students of mine back when I used to teach creative writing at the community center. Somehow, word had reached even them. They offered support, kind words, old memories of how I'd helped them find their voice. That I kept. The casserole? "Chicken and rice. From Loretta." I recognized the handwriting on the sticky note. "Justice needs fuel." That made me laugh. First real laugh in weeks. Later that afternoon, I heard a rustling outside my front window. I peeked through the blinds and saw Josh. Not on the porch, on the sidewalk, standing with his arms crossed, staring at the house like it had betrayed him. He wasn't holding anything. No apology pie, no flowers, just his phone in one hand and an expression I didn't recognize, cold, stiff, mechanical. I didn't open the door, but I opened the window just enough to speak through the screen. "Josh?" He looked up, surprised. "You're here," he said flatly. "I live here." He walked closer, stopping just before the bottom step. "You've made a mess." "I'm cleaning it," I said. "You could have just talked to me." I tried," I said, my voice rising despite myself. "I tried when you laughed while Tina humiliated me. I tried when you let her raise her voice at your mother in your house. I tried when you stood by and watched my grandchild cry and still said nothing." He looked away. "I didn't think it was that serious," he muttered. "Of course not," I replied. "Because you were never the one wiping gravy off your neck while someone you raised stood silent." He kicked a loose pebble on the path. "You didn't have to get the law involved. And you didn't have to throw your mother under a bus for inheritance that isn't even promised. There it was. He looked up sharply, lips parting like he wanted to defend himself. But he didn't. Instead, he said, "What's going to happen now?" I stared at him. My son. My boy. The one who used to tuck his stuffed bear beside my pillow when I was sick. The one who used to cry when I had nightmares because he thought they could hurt me too. And now here he stood, with nothing left to say but, "What's going to happen now?" I spoke softly. "Now, the consequences begin, and I suggest you talk to a lawyer." He stepped back, stung. "I didn't mean for this to go this far," he said, "but you didn't stop it either." He left then, no goodbye, no slam of the door, just silence as his footsteps receded into the street. I sat down hard on the porch step, wrapping my cardigan tighter around my shoulders. Later that evening, I walked to Loretta's and returned her casserole dish. She invited me in for tea. We didn't talk much, just watched the news and shared the kind of silence that feels like a quilt, not a wall. Before I left, she said, "You're braver than you know, Maggie." I nodded. "I don't feel brave." She smiled. "That's how you know you are." Back home, I opened my notebook and wrote, Saturday, November 2nd. Today, my son came to see me not as a mother, but as an obstacle. He brought no apology, only denial. But I saw him clearly, painfully, and I let the truth stand without shrinking. I flipped back a few pages and slipped Emily's drawing between the lines of that entry. Then I wrote, "Love without boundaries becomes expectation, and expectation without respect is just a prettier name for control." Sunday mornings used to be sacred in our house. Alan would wake first, tiptoe to the kitchen, and make French toast while humming off-key to some old Elvis tune. I'd follow shortly after, in my robe and slippers, always pretending to be annoyed that he started breakfast without me. Josh, back then just a boy, would come last hair wild, socks mismatched, arms open for syrupy hugs. That version of my life lived only in memories now. What I had today was silence, broken only by the creak of the stairs as I made my way down and the gentle ping of the coffee pot as it finished brewing. I sipped slowly, phone in hand, scrolling through a message from Deborah. Good news. We have a tentative court date to formalize the protection order. Also, the handwriting analysis came back 90% matched to Josh's known samples. It'll hold in court. I stared at the screen, then set it down. There was something so final about percentages, about numbers that confirmed what hearts already knew but didn't want to accept. I didn't need 90% to tell me my son wrote that note. My body had already absorbed it like a wound. Mid-morning, I walked to the study and unlocked the lower cabinet drawer. Inside, still wrapped in the thick manila folder Deborah had prepared, was my updated will. I hadn't opened it since we revised it last spring. At the time, it felt premature. Now, it felt like a blueprint for peace. Alan and I had written the first version together when Josh turned 21. Back then, it was simple. Everything to him, if he was responsible. If not, a charitable trust. Alan, ever the optimist, believed Josh would rise to the occasion. I wasn't so sure, but I agreed. Because I still believe children, like gardens, bloom best when trusted to grow. Today, I flipped open the updated version, signed and notarized, with Josh and Tina's names crossed out in firm, dark ink. Instead, a trust had been created in Emily and Ben's names, with provisions for counseling, education, and a clause that ensured I remained sole executor while living. As I reread the document, my chest ached, not from doubt, but from the cost. Love, it turns out, has accounting. I closed the file and returned it to the drawer. Then I walked outside, the wind crisp but not cruel, and found myself once again beside the garden. It was there that I heard a voice, not real perhaps, but remembered. Alan's voice, low and warm in my ear, as if the breeze carried it from whatever place holds our dead. "You're doing the right thing, Redbird, even if it hurts." I didn't cry, I just nodded. I knew he would have hated this. Seeing his boy turn cold, seeing me step away. But he also would have known this was necessary. That dignity wasn't a thing to hand over just to keep peace at the table. Around noon, the doorbell rang. Not Tina, not Josh. It was Pastor Ray. Tall, gentle-eyed, with hands that always looked like they were built for holding grief. He'd married Alan and me. He'd baptized Josh. And now here he was, standing on my porch like a question I hadn't asked yet. "Mind if I come in?" he asked. I led him to the living room, offered him tea, and sat quietly while he arranged his coat across his lap. "I heard about the police visit," he said. "And about Josh." I sighed. "So the entire town knows now." He smiled kindly. "Not everyone, just the ones who care." We talked for an hour. About forgiveness, about justice, about the quiet wars fought behind family photos. And then he said something that stayed with me long after he left. "You can forgive someone, Maggie, without opening your door again. Forgiveness is not consent to be harmed." After he left, I went upstairs and pulled out the old photo album from the top shelf of the linen closet. I flipped through page after page: birthdays, Christmas mornings, beach trips, skin knees, and graduation caps. Josh's face smiled from everyone. But by the end, I wasn't crying. I was grieving something else. The belief that love alone could fix what willful blindness had broken. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Sunday, November 3rd. The man I loved reminded me from memory that dignity is worth the loss. The man I trusted with our vows reminded me that forgiveness is personal, not permission. And I reminded myself that family, real family, doesn't throw food when they're told no. Oh." I stared at the page, then slowly wrote, "Sometimes, healing means rewriting the will not out of bitterness, but out of clarity." Monday morning began with the kind of gray skies that make everything feel 2 shades heavier. I watched the wind push against the oak outside the front window, its limbs bare now, the last of the golden leaves scattered like tired soldiers across the yard. The stillness was broken by the shrill ring of the landline. Yes, I still had one. Old habits die hard, and sometimes they're all that's left when everything else begins to change. "Mrs. Dalton?" a voice said on the other end, smooth, too calm. "This is Carla Winslow from Aegis Financial and Trust. I believe you're the trustee for a family account involving minors, Emily and Benjamin Dalton." My heart skipped. "Yes," I replied carefully. "I am. I was calling to confirm some activity. There was an attempted login into the trust account late last night. Unsuccessful, but we flagged it due to multiple incorrect password entries and an unusual IP address." My fingers curled around the phone cord. "Who tried to access it?" "I can't release that information directly," she said, "but I thought it was important to notify you. We've placed a temporary hold and heightened security measures until you're able to confirm further instructions. Would you like us to enable facial recognition and 2-step verification tied to your voice ID?" "Yes," I said, sharper than I meant. "Please." Immediately. I hung up and stared at the phone. Josh. It had to be. There was no one else who knew the existence of the trust except him, and maybe Tina if he'd been careless or deliberate. My hands trembled as I typed out a message to Deborah, explaining what I'd just been told. She responded swiftly, with one word: "Unacceptable." Then another: "We escalate." I didn't even know what that meant yet. But I trusted her. By noon, I'd received a draft of a cease and desist letter directed at Josh and Tina, with language so sharp it felt like it could cut through bone. Deborah had CC'd their last known employer addresses and offered to hand-deliver if they didn't respond electronically within 24 hours. I stared at the screen. What kind of mother has to send a cease and desist letter to her own son? Apparently, the kind who finally said no. I stood from the computer and walked to the hallway mirror, not to admire or even assess, but to check for someone I still recognized. I saw a woman with lines around her eyes, but they weren't just from age, they were carved by grief, yes, but also by grit. That afternoon, Loretta called. "I just saw him again," she said. "Josh, parked outside the fire station down the block, sitting in the car alone, looking like a man who lost something and doesn't know if he wants it back." "He did lose something," I said. "He lost the right to bully me." Loretta didn't argue. She never did. She just said, "I'm watching, Maggie. Let me know if you need anything." I hung up and went to the garage. For years, I'd avoided that place. It still smelled faintly of Allen engine oil, wood shavings, a whiff of his old aftershave that had long dried into the boards of his workbench. I reached for the rusted lockbox in the top cabinet, blew off the dust, and opened it. Inside was a pile of photos, documents, and a small cassette recorder. Alan's old dictation device. He used it to record memories for Josh when he got sick, said he wanted him to know who he was after he was gone. I slipped the tape into my kitchen radio, hit play, and listened. The first few seconds were crackly, then, "Hey, kiddo. If you're listening to this, your old man's probably not around anymore. But your mom? She's still the strongest person you'll ever know. You won't always like her. But if you're ever lucky enough to really understand her, you'll see she was the reason everything stayed together." My breath caught. Don't let anybody take her for granted. Not even you. I stopped the tape. It was too much, and exactly enough. That night, I poured myself a small glass of wine, not to celebrate, not even to soothe, but as a toast. To Alan. To the woman he saw before I did. The woman I had now become. I opened the notebook and wrote, Monday, November 4th. Today my son tried to break into something meant for my grandchildren's future, and I didn't weep. I acted. I drew the line deeper and made it legal. Sometimes, survival looks like paperwork and lawyers. But sometimes, it sounds like the voice of a man long gone, reminding you that your strength was never accidental. Then, underneath, some truths are so clear, they echo even from the grave. Tuesday arrived with sunlight streaking through the kitchen window, laying golden patches across the tile like scattered blessings. I sat at the breakfast table, fingers wrapped around a steaming mug of chamomile, the letter from Deborah resting nearby. It was printed and ready, the cease and desist. All that remained was my approval. I stared at it for a long time. There's something devastating about seeing your child's name typed in legal format. Joshua Alan Dalton. The same name I'd written on birthday cards, school forms, and the top of every Christmas gift label for over 3 decades. Now, it sat printed at the top of a warning. But I didn't hesitate when I signed it. By 10 o'clock, Deborah confirmed that her office had sent it electronically and via registered mail. A process server would deliver a physical copy if Josh or Tina refused to respond within 48 hours. With that done, I turned to another task, one that had been lingering in the corners of my conscience. Writing letters. Not to Josh, not yet. But to Emily and Ben. Someday, they'd need the truth, not just facts, not just legal documents, but the whole picture. From the perspective of the woman who once tucked them into bed and taught them how to peel apples without breaking the skin. I opened a fresh notebook, not the daily one. This was new, white, clean. For Emily and Ben, I wrote at the top. Then I paused, the pen hovering over the page. If you're reading this, it's because I believe one day you'll be old enough to ask hard questions and brave enough to hear honest answers. This is not a letter of blame, it's a letter of boundaries. Of love that didn't stop, even when it had to stand apart. I wrote for over 2 hours, stopping only to sip water and let tears come without apology. I told them about the dinner, about the plate, about the bruise on my collarbone and the sting in my heart. I told them I never stopped loving their parents, but that love is not a license, and pain is not permission. I told them I protected their future the only way I knew how, by standing between what they needed and what others demanded. By the time I closed the notebook, I felt lighter. I didn't seal the letter, not yet, but I placed it in my desk drawer beside Alan's cassette and whispered to no one, "That part's done." Around lunch, Loretta came by with a paper bag and a smile. "Chicken noodle, it's healing soup." I invited her in and we sat by the fireplace, bowls in hand, listening to the logs crackle. "Have you ever," I asked, stirring slowly, "had to love someone from a distance?" Loretta didn't even blink. "My sister," she said. "She stole our father's savings, lied to our mother's face, and I still send her a Christmas card every year. Why? Because I don't want her to forget who she was before she lost herself." I nodded, her words sinking in like warmth. Before she left, she touched my shoulder. "You're doing the hardest kind of loving there is, Maggie, the kind that says, 'I will not help you destroy yourself or me.'" That night, after dinner, I checked my email. A reply from Josh. Short, cold. "Received your letter. Don't contact me again unless it's through legal channels." No apology, no explanation, just finality. I stared at the message for a long time, then closed my laptop. It didn't hurt like I thought it would. It felt necessary. Later, I opened my notebook. Tuesday, November 5th. Today, I signed my name to a boundary, not out of rage, not out of grief, but out of resolve. And then, I wrote to the children who may one day ask why their grandmother disappeared. I hope they understand. I hope they know silence can be protection, distance can be love. Then I added, some letters you send, some you save, and some you simply survive writing. Wednesday morning, I ventured out. I hadn't been to the town market since the night of the dinner. The thought of running into familiar faces, of forced smiles and polite pity, had kept me tethered to my front porch, waving to the world from a safe distance. But the milk was nearly gone, and I was tired of drinking tea that tasted like water. I bundled into my old navy peacoat, the one with Alan's favorite brass buttons, and made my way to Carlson's Market just past 9, early enough to avoid the rush, late enough to dodge the morning gossips. Or so I thought. The moment I walked in, I felt the shift. Not stares. That would have been too obvious. But glances quiet, fast, like people trying to remember where they'd heard my name most recently. Like they weren't sure if I was a cautionary tale or the villain in someone else's story. I kept my chin high and my basket low. At the dairy section, I reached for a gallon of 2% when I heard a voice behind me. Madgie? I turned. It was Ruth Applegate, church treasurer, fond of lemon bars and sharp opinions. Oh, she said, as if startled by her own bravery. I wasn't sure if it was you. You look strong. I raised an eyebrow. Thank you, I think. She leaned in slightly. I just wanted to say, I heard about Josh and Tina and the police. I didn't want to believe it at first, but she trailed off. But her face softened. You're not the first mother in this town to stand alone for doing the right thing, and you won't be the last. If you ever need anything, rides, meals, someone to sit next to you at church, call me. He blinked. That wasn't what I expected. Not from Ruth. Thank you, I said quietly. We chatted for a moment about harmless things, holiday pies, the new pastor's haircut, then she moved on, her cart squeaking with each turn. Near the register, I saw Mrs. Pennington, Ben's third-grade teacher. She waved, uncertain. I waved back, equally unsure. Small-town relationships don't die easily. They stretch, they strain, they go quiet, but they rarely disappear. As I stepped outside into the crisp November air, I felt something I hadn't in a while. Acknowledged. Not redeemed. Not celebrated, but seen. Back at home, I unpacked the groceries and placed a fresh pie crust in the fridge, just in case Emily ever came back, just in case. The mail came mid-afternoon. A thick manila envelope, no return address. My stomach twisted. I opened it carefully. Inside were photos. Not of me. Of my house. Taken from across the street. Different times of day. Some during the police visit. One while I was watering the mums. One with Loretta at my side. My hands trembled. At the bottom of the envelope was a single sheet of paper. No handwriting this time. Just typed words, block font. You think you're safe. You're not. We see everything. I sat down, heart racing. This wasn't Josh. This was bigger. I took a photo of the letter and the envelope and sent it to Deborah. Her reply came seconds later. Call me. Now. We spoke for 10 minutes. She was calm, clinical, but I could hear the shift in her tone the way a nurse sounds when she's trying not to alarm the patient. She asked if I had external cameras set up, and I said yes. She told me to forward everything to the local police and offered to connect me with a private investigator she trusted. Do you feel safe? She asked. No, I said honestly, but I feel ready. After the call, I checked the footage from the past week. Nothing obvious, but someone had been close. Someone had been watching. That night, I locked every door twice and pulled the curtains tight. Then, I lit a candle, just one, on the windowsill. Not out of superstition, out of defiance. I opened the notebook and wrote, Wednesday, November 6th. Today, the world reminded me that truth has enemies, that even justice has shadows. But I also saw something else, an old friend in a grocery aisle, a whisper of kindness in a stare, a voice that didn't doubt me. Then I added, fear is loud. But resolve? She burned slow and steady, like a candle in the window daring the dark to come closer. Thursday began like most days now, with silence and a sense that something unseen had shifted overnight. The candle I'd left burning on the windowsill had melted down to a stub, leaving behind a waxy halo on the sill and a faint scent of lavender. I didn't blow it out last night. I let it burn until it gave up. By mid-morning, Deborah had arranged for the private investigator to call. His name was Sam Navarro, ex-cop, now working independently. His voice was gruff but clear, like gravel smoothed by years of listening to people who didn't want to talk. He asked precise questions. How long had I noticed the odd behavior, what security systems I had in place, whether I'd seen any unfamiliar vehicles lingering. I told him everything. He didn't flinch. "I'll come by tomorrow," he said. "Do a sweep, set up a few temporary cams. You'll sleep better." "Oh? Will you find them?" I asked. He was quiet for a beat. "If they want to be seen, I will. If not, I'll give them a reason to rethink." That comforted me more than it should have. In the afternoon, I baked muffins, just something to keep my hands busy. Cranberry orange, Alan's favorite. I sent a batch to Loretta and left 2 at the mail station for Ruth. When you're under siege, sometimes you fight with kindness, not because it changes the enemy, but because it reminds you who you are. At 5:43 p.m., the power went out. Just the house, not the neighborhood. I knew because the lights in Loretta's kitchen across the street were still glowing. My heart thudded. I grabbed my flashlight and phone, moved quickly from room to room, checking windows. Nothing broken, no forced entry. But the back gate was open, and I never left it open. I locked it, checked the camera system offline. Either coincidence or calculation. I chose to believe neither. By 6:20 p.m., the lights flickered back on. No explanation. I called the electric company. No outages reported. No work orders in my area. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of panic, but preparation. I moved a chair by the window and waited. At 12 a.m., there was a knock. Not the door. The back window. I froze. Another knock. Deliberate. Then a voice, low and male. "Maggie, I know you're awake." It wasn't Josh. The voice was older. Rougher. I didn't answer. I reached for my phone, hand shaking, and hit record. Then I called Deborah, let it ring twice, and hung up. It was our emergency signal. She'd set it up just in case. The man knocked again. "You think anyone will believe you after this? You think your paper army matters?" I stayed silent. After a moment, the knock stopped. Silence fell. I waited 5 minutes. 10. Then tires. Fast. Fading. He was gone. Or at least, he'd left. By morning, the police had come and gone. They dusted the window. They took the recording. Deborah arrived in a coat over pajamas, her face paler than I'd ever seen it. "You're not staying here tonight," she said. "Pack a bag. We're filing for an emergency injunction. Whoever this is, they're escalating." I nodded. That afternoon, I went upstairs and packed. Not much. Just a change of clothes, some toiletries, my notebooks. I grabbed Alan's tape recorder, Emily's drawing, and the letter I'd written to the kids. I left the candle on the sill unlit, but waiting. Before I locked the door behind me, I looked at the living room. It wasn't just furniture. It was a witness. It had seen joy, pain, betrayal, and now defiance. "I'll be back," I whispered, "and when I do, we end this." That night, I slept at Deborah's guest room. She made soup, poured tea, and left the hallway light on like a mother would. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Alan's words playing in my head. "You're not wrong, Redbird. You're just early. Truth always catches up." In the quiet, I opened my notebook and wrote, Thursday, November 7th. Tonight, someone came for my silence and found my stillness instead. I didn't scream, I didn't run. I recorded his voice and waited. Because fear might knock, but resolve doesn't answer without a lawyer. Then I added, when they come in the dark, they forget some women are made of midnight, not morning. Friday morning, the sky was overcast again, like it hadn't yet decided whether to break into rain or light. I sat at Deborah's kitchen table, sipping black coffee from a mug that read, "Legal, not lethal" in faded letters. It made me smile. She bustled nearby, phone pressed to her ear, orchestrating court orders like a conductor directing a symphony of justice. "They signed the emergency injunction," she said as she hung up. "Effective immediately. Anyone seen within 100 yards of your property with prior threats will be in violation. We're not just defending anymore, Maggie. We're building the case." I nodded. Sam Navarro arrived just after 10. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a presence that made the room seem smaller. He wore a navy jacket and spoke in short, purposeful sentences. "I reviewed the footage from your cameras," he began, pulling out a small drive. "There's a man in a black hoodie, visible 3 times in the last week. Always after sundown. Same build, same walk, same timing. Can we identify him?" Deborah asked. Sam hesitated. "Not yet. Face is obscured. But I've got a guy running it through enhancement software. We'll see what we can pull." Then he turned to me. "But there's something else. The letter. It wasn't printed on a home printer. It was done at a print shop commercial toner, cut edges. I've contacted every print shop within 20 miles. If one kept a record, we'll find it." That detail sent a chill through me. Whoever did this had planned it, not rage, not a heat-of-the-moment outburst. Deliberate, coordinated, professional even. Later that afternoon, Sam drove me back to the house with Deborah. They insisted I not be alone. Everything looked untouched, but different. The house had absorbed the fear like old wood soaks up smoke. It didn't scream, but it remembered. Sam walked the perimeter while Deborah and I entered the living room. She checked every lock, every blind, while I sat once again in the chair near the fireplace. But I didn't feel helpless anymore. I felt prepared. Sam returned with news. "Found fresh prints on the back gate handle. I've marked them. Police are on their way to lift them." "Will they find anything?" I asked. He gave a small shrug. "They might. But even if they don't, we're showing a pattern. Persistence. That matters in court." As the police arrived and began their work, I went upstairs to the bedroom. I stood by the window, watching them move below uniforms against a backdrop of roses and rusting garden tools. Alan's voice returned again in my head. "Justice isn't always loud, Maggie. Sometimes it's just relentless." Back downstairs, Deborah was speaking to an officer. I caught only the tail end. "We've got enough now to request supervised mediation or even temporary restraining clauses for the family members, depending on how the judge reads it." The officer nodded. "She's lucky to have you." Deborah turned to me, smiling faintly. "It's not luck, it's just the right team at the right time." That evening, we sat in the kitchen as Sam installed the last of the motion sensors and cameras. Before he left, he handed me a small remote. "Panic alarm. Connex straight to dispatch. No delay." I took it with both hands, then looked at him. "Do you think it'll come to that?" He looked at me squarely. "It already did. Now we're ready." After he left, Deborah offered to stay the night, but I told her no. I need one night in my own house, not as a target, but as a witness reclaiming her ground. She hesitated, then kissed my cheek. "Then lock everything and call if you even feel off." I promised I would. That night, I turned on every porch light, lit the candle again, and sat with my notebook. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel haunted. It felt awake. Alive. Friday, November 8th. Today, I returned home not as a woman waiting to be heard again, but as a woman preparing for the end of a long war, with cameras, orders, witnesses, and the weight of the truth behind me. I am no longer surviving. I'm documenting. I'm collecting. I'm proving. Then I added, "Red Bird isn't a nickname. It's a warning. I might look small, but I will defend my nest with fire." Monday morning arrived with the scent of burnt toast and nervous resolve. I hadn't meant to overcook breakfast. My hands just weren't listening to my head. The court hearing was scheduled for 10 o'clock sharp. It wasn't a trial, not yet. Just a motion review for the injunctions. A preliminary meeting, but it felt like facing a firing squad in heels. Deborah picked me up at 8, 30 inches her silver sedan. She looked like she meant business, and not the casual kind. Slate gray suit. No jewelry except a wedding band. Her eyes sharp behind square glasses. "You ready?" she asked as I buckled in. "More than I thought," I replied. And I meant it. The courthouse sat like a quiet giant at the edge of town, red brick, white columns, and an old oak tree out front that had likely heard more confessions than any pulpit. We entered through security, our heels echoing against the tile like metronomes counting down something irreversible. Inside the courtroom, I saw them. Josh, Tina, both seated behind their own counsel. No smiles, no apologies. Josh didn't even look at me. He looked past me, like I was just an object between two legal points. Tina smirked once, then crossed her legs and checked her phone. Deborah leaned close. Don't react. Don't give them anything to twist. The judge, a woman named Matthews, entered right on time. She wore glasses and no nonsense. The kind of woman who had no time for theatrics but carried compassion in her tone when earned. Let's begin, she said. Deborah stood and laid out the events succinctly. The incident at dinner, the threats, the police reports, the vandalism, the envelope, the footage, the investigators' findings. She didn't embellish. She didn't need to. The facts were heavy enough. When it was Josh's lawyer's turn, he tried to spin the narrative. My client is devastated that a family disagreement has escalated to this point. While there may have been raised voices, there is no evidence of ongoing threats, and certainly nothing that justifies a restraining order. Deborah stood again. With respect, Your Honor, this is not about disagreement. It's about safety. My client has been watched, harassed, and targeted. She has cooperated fully with law enforcement and submitted recordings, photographs, and third-party documentation. Judge Matthews turned to Josh's side. Were you aware of the attempt to access the children's trust account? The lawyer hesitated. Josh shifted in his seat. I was not aware my client had attempted that, the lawyer said. I didn't try, Josh muttered. But it was too late. The judge raised an eyebrow. Your IP address places you at the attempted login. I've reviewed the evidence. Tina looked at him sharply. You said it was spam. He turned to her, whispering something low and angry. That was it. The whisper. The judge banged her gavel once. Take a recess. 10 minutes. Counsel my chambers. Now. As they left, I remained seated. Deborah placed her hand over mine. I realized only then how tightly I'd been clutching the edge of the bench. He's cracking, she whispered. They're unraveling. I watched Josh as he left the room, his shoulders hunched, his expression less righteous now more like a child caught mid-lie. 10 minutes passed. 20. When the judge returned, her voice was calm but steely. I'm granting the emergency injunction. It will be reviewed for long-term extension at the formal hearing. In the meantime, Mr. and Mrs. Dalton are ordered to remain no less than 150 yards from Miss Margaret Dalton's home, workplace, or places of worship. Any violation will result in immediate arrest. Josh exhaled sharply. Tina glared. And I? I didn't smile. But I stood taller. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered, small-town ones, just a few with notepads and handheld mics. One asked, Miss Dalton, do you feel this is justice? I looked directly at her. This isn't justice, I said. This is protection. Justice comes later. That night, back home, I lit the candle again. Not in fear, in memory, in warning, in pride. Then I opened my notebook. Monday, November 11th. Today, I watched my son shrink in the presence of truth. Not because I wanted him to, but because I had to show the world I wouldn't be made small for loving him. And no woman should be punished for drawing the line where dignity begins. Then I added, justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers in court, and everyone listens. By Tuesday morning, the air felt different. Not safer, necessarily, but cleaner. The night before, I'd slept with both eyes shut for the first time in nearly a week. It wasn't that I believed the threats were over, I wasn't that naive, but something in me had shifted. The courtroom hadn't just handed down distance and conditions. It had given me proof that even the small middle-aged woman with bruised ribs and a broken heart could still bend the system toward fairness one piece of paper at a time. I made my usual morning tea, stood at the kitchen window, and saw the first cardinal of the season land on the fence post. Red, bold, unafraid. I smiled. You're late this year, I whispered. But welcome. Around mid-morning, Loretta dropped by with a warm batch of cornbread muffins and a tighter-than-usual hug. You were on Channel 7 last night, she said. The anchor called you a local hero. I'm not a hero, I said. I'm just stubborn. She nodded. Same thing, sometimes. We sat on the porch and talked about nothing and everything. About how the cold always hits the joints faster after 60. About how the world seems meaner than it used to, but maybe we're just more awake to it now. Then she leaned in and said, "Have you thought about talking to the kids yet? Emily and Ben?" The question was gentle, but it landed heavy. "I wrote them letters," I said. "Haven't decided when to send them." Loretta didn't push. She just said, "They're going to need you. Someday. And when that day comes, it'll mean everything that you kept the porch light on." After she left, I found myself standing in the hallway, staring at the frame drawing Emily had made 3 Christmases ago, our family, drawn in her 7-year-old scrawl, stick arms, giant eyes, everyone holding hands. Even Tina, Afe and May. That afternoon, I received a call from Sam Navarro. His voice was clipped but urgent. "I found something," he said, "at the print shop near North Hills." "Oh, what is it?" "Security footage. A man matching the figure from your backyard. He came in to print flyers. Same font, same paper, same cutting pattern as your threat note." "Flyers?" I asked. "He ordered 30, paid in cash, left no name, but his license plate was caught as he pulled out of the lot." "Josh?" "No," he said. "That's the part you need to hear in person." He arrived an hour later with a folder in hand and a grave look. "His name is Dennis Whitaker," Sam said. "Former acquaintance of Tina's. They went to high school together. Minor criminal history, trespassing, disorderly conduct. He's not clean, and he's not subtle." He handed me the photo. I recognized him instantly. He'd been at the dinner. One of those vague background faces, Josh's old work friend, they'd said. He'd poured too much wine, laughed too loud. He'd also watched me from across the table a little too long. "You think she put him up to this?" I asked. "I think she weaponized loyalty," Sam said. "And some men are eager to be the sword." I felt sick. Tina hadn't just tried to isolate me. She'd recruited. "Can we do anything?" I asked. "Oh, we will," Sam said. "This just became a criminal case. Deborah confirmed it by 6 p.m. The police had issued a warrant. Dennis would be picked up for questioning within 24 hours. Meanwhile, the judge approved additional protection terms for me. And yet, as the sun began to fall behind the trees, I felt strangely still. Not vindicated, not vengeful, just steady. I took the letters I'd written to Emily and Ben from the drawer. I added a short page to each. I'm not hiding. I'm just standing still until the wind dies down. When it does, I'll be here, same porch, same tea, same open heart. Then I sealed them, added stamps, and placed them by the front door. Tomorrow they'd go out. That night I lit the candle again. And I wrote, Tuesday, November 12th. Today I learned that sometimes the threat doesn't come from the person you expect, but the one they send in their place. I also learned that courage is cumulative. One action builds the next. One page becomes protection. One whisper of truth becomes a roar of justice. Then I added, Redbirds don't migrate. They endure winter. And so will I. Wednesday started quietly, but not the nervous kind of quiet it was. The calm before clarity, the kind you feel after you've already cried, already screamed, already signed the documents and drawn the lines. The kind of quiet that only happens when there's nothing left to prove, only the final pieces to place. At 9:22 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was Deborah. They arrested him, she said. Dennis Whitaker, early this morning. He was at a motel off Route 18, 3 blocks from your house. My throat went dry. What was he doing there? They haven't confirmed yet, but in his vehicle they found printed flyers. Some with your address, your face pulled from social media. Others were covered in lies, slander. He hadn't distributed them yet, thank God. She exhaled sharply on the other end. There's more, she added. He admitted Tina gave him the idea, that she encouraged him to shake you up, to remind you who held the cards. The room tilted slightly, or maybe it was just me swaying. She hired him? Not officially, Deborah said. No money changed hands, but intent is enough. It's called criminal incitement, and we're adding it to the civil suit. Tina just became a much bigger problem. I thanked her, calmly, professionally. Then I hung up and sat at the kitchen table in silence, staring at the jar of jam I'd never opened. It was Cherry Emily's favorite. I'd bought it the day before the dinner. Funny how small things become monuments. By afternoon, news had spread. Local blogs, a small mention on the 5 o'clock news. Family feud escalates into legal action, local woman harassed by son's associate. They didn't name names, but in a town like ours, anonymity's as thin as wet paper. I received a text from an unknown number. "I'm sorry." No name. No punctuation. I stared at it. It was from Josh. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long time. Then I typed, "So am I." And I didn't send it. Not yet. Instead, I walked to the front porch, lit the candle early, and watched the mail truck roll down the street. The letters to Emily and Ben were gone now. In the world. On their way. They'd carry my voice into a house I was no longer welcome in, and maybe someday they'd be understood. Sam Navarro stopped by around 5. He looked tired but satisfied. "Whitaker's facing multiple charges," he said. "They're keeping him for at least 72 hours while they process. He's cooperating." Apparently Tina cut him off the moment things got messy. Cowards always run first. "Will this go to trial?" I asked. "Could. Might settle. But you'll have leverage now. Her involvement is on record. Her credibility is gone." "Good," I said. "I don't want her near my grandchildren." "You may get that wish," he replied. "Judges don't like putting kids near chaos." He paused, then handed me a photo one of the flyers Dennis had printed. My face, under the words, "Selfish, dangerous, bitter old woman." I stared at it. Then I folded it in half and tossed it into the fire. Sam smiled faintly. "That's the right response." Before he left, he said, "By the way, those cameras? They caught him again the night before last. He tried the gate, looked straight into the lens, like he wanted you to see." "Well," I said, "he got his wish." That night, I opened my notebook one more time. Wednesday, November 13th. Today, silence broke not with shouting, but with truth made legal. A man was arrested. A name was exposed. A mother's warning turned out not to be a rant, but a report. And now? Now the ones who whispered are speaking louder, and the ones who lied are scrambling for cover. Then I added, sometimes, the worst thing you can do to someone trying to scare you is not flinch. Friday morning arrived without fanfare. No ominous mail, no knocks at the window, no police calls. Just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the subtle crackle of the November wind through the trees. For the first time in what felt like years, I woke up and didn't brace for something terrible. My shoulders stayed down. My jaw didn't ache from clenching in sleep. Peace hadn't arrived. But the war, for now, had paused. I made a full breakfast: bacon, scrambled eggs, toast with real butter. I set a second plate across from mine out of habit, the way I had for years. For Alan. I didn't cry when I realized what I was doing. I just nodded to the empty chair and said, "You'd be proud, Redbird." After breakfast, I walked to the mailbox in my slippers. Cold concrete kissed my feet, sharp and clean. No fear. Just breath. Just movement. Just mine. Inside the box was a single envelope, handwritten, my name in shaky cursive. Emily. I opened it right there on the porch, gripping the wood railing for support. "Grandma, I got your letter. Mom says I'm not supposed to talk to you right now, but I wanted you to know that I remember the night with the soup, and I didn't think you were being mean. I think something was wrong. I'm sorry for what happened. I miss you. Love, Emily." My breath hitched. Tears came quietly, not like before, not grief this time. Relief. Hope. Proof that the truth lands where it needs to. By afternoon, Deborah called. Tina had retained a new lawyer. Her old one dropped her after the criminal incitement charges were added. Apparently Dennis had fully cooperated, offering text records that outlined Tina's manipulation in disgusting detail. Deborah was confident the case would settle. "She'll be restricted," she said. "No contact with you, no claim to your assets, and likely limited custody unless supervised." "Good," I said. "Not for revenge, for protection." "You've done more than protect yourself, Maggie," Deborah said. You've carved a path for every woman over 50 who's been told to stay quiet and take it. You made noise, and now they hear it. After we hung up, I lit the candle one final time. Not because I felt in danger, but because it had become a ritual, an act of defiance, of remembrance, of resilience. I watched its flame flicker against the dusky light, casting long shadows across the living room that no longer felt haunted, just lived in. Then, I took my notebook and wrote the last entry. Friday, November 15th. This chapter ends not with revenge, not with loss, but with quiet justice. With distance, safety, and a little girl's handwriting that broke through the silence. The house still stands, so do I. Some battles are visible, others are won behind closed doors with pen, patience, and unrelenting dignity. And at the bottom, I wrote, "The candle still burns, but now it's just for warmth." I closed the notebook and placed it beside Alan's recorder. Then I picked up the phone and dialed a familiar number. Loretta answered, voice bright. "Well, look who's calling." "Coffee?" I asked. "I'll bring the pie." I smiled. The sun had set, but my heart hadn't. Justice had come. Not all at once. Not loudly, but steadily, like a woman who had been pushed too far, and finally decided to push back.